Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Melissa and Lee of Frame. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so it's a little bit unconventional doing kind of the duo interview. We've done a couple, but not many. But to kick it off, I would like to dive into your upbringing. So, starting small, the philosophy that everyone starts small. So, where did you guys grow up, and what were some of your interests growing up?
Lee?
You want me to start? I always have to start. So yeah, I mean, my upbringing, I grew up actually in Canada, in Toronto, to be specific. I was always an athlete, loved sports, hockey, soccer, football, loved watching baseball, didn't play much. But yeah, I was always an athlete, always loved running, always loved, playing team sports. And growing up, I went to a couple great schools that had great athletic programs. I wasn't much of a scholastic. I'd rather be out on the field.
Yeah,
And personally, I thought it was a lot of fun. Growing up, it was tough. It wasn't easy. Obviously, being a kid growing up, tough academics, competitive athlete, and competitive with myself.
totally.
And that's a little bit of my background.
So I'm the opposite. I was very scholastic. I was always the top. In addition to being very cerebral, I was also an athlete.
That's true.
Yeah. So I had
Yeah.
both.
Love it. So, I'm curious then, where did you guys end up meeting? Because, I mean, your universities are not close together, from what I know. Does this come in your childhood, post graduation? What does this look like?
So we actually met when we were around 22.
Yeah.
And we met in Muskoka, which is...
It's like a summer destination, kind of like the Hamptons of Canada.
Yeah. A couple hours
Okay.
from Toronto.
Which is kind of neat because we both actually came by boat to a friend of ours' birthday party. And we happened to
Wow.
meet at the birthday, and then, later that evening, just...
He became obsessed.
I wouldn't go that far. We hit it off, and we ended up meeting, and almost 13, 14 years later, we're still here together and now partnered in a business.
Love it. So we'll dive more into kind of co-founders, what that's like. But going back a little bit to your schooling, I didn't know when you met. So touch on where you guys went to school, what you studied, and where you envision yourself and career to go at this point in your life.
I went to school for just about a BA in arts and social sciences.
Somebody just said that's the best degree to have right now if they were to hire. Anyways.
I think it was Mr. Wonderful.
It was. What's his name? From Shark Tank.
Interesting.
Yeah. But
yeah.
But ultimately, when I went to university, I wasn't really thinking of a career path. I went to university to, as that's the next step in, graduating high school.
I'm also from like a finance family.
Sure.
So there was expectations. He was probably trying to evade them a little.
Sure, but
for sure.
But ultimately, I think when you're 18, I mean, look, there's a lot of people that really understand their career path and have a straight line to what they're doing. But I'm more of I was always kind of an out of the box thinker and a late bloomer, as they would say. For me, it was more of building a network when I went to school. Less about the school, more about the network that you kind of build. And I think as I look back on it, it really helped me to elevate myself in the business world. In terms of school and scholastic, I mean, really, I think university is important because of the social network side of it. The amount of relationships that you garner, the people that you keep in touch with, where you go on your next path, where, doctors and lawyers have a specific outcome that they want to see happen. For me, it was kind of a starting point to the next step of, getting into a business career.
For sure.
I studied psychology. And I always also was very intrigued by the sciences and specifically medicine. So while I was studying my undergrad in psychology, I actually was doing courses that would have enabled me to, if I wanted to, apply to medical school. But again, I was always an athlete. So even while I was studying psychology, and I loved, and I still, by the way, the application of like human psychology is extremely relevant in business. The way you engage with people, the way you read them, highly perspicacious. So I think it's a tool that I developed and further evolved it, not only from the perspective that I was studying psychology and then specifically human psychology, but also just understanding the way, like neural synapses, the way your brain works, neural pathways. Like it gave me a really good, it was always very passionate about psychology, but then later when I applied it to business, I think it definitely gives me an edge. And then also was always an athlete. So I was like a classically trained ballerina. I was competitive starting at the age of 5 or 6. And when I was in university, I became a trainer. I did my certs in yoga and Pilates, and then just further developed my, my love for athleticism and the way you can apply it to one's entire life, like the longevity, not only So I didn't really know I wanted to be a businesswoman, but it was an ever evolving path, and now I'm unstoppable. No, I just think I always had a lot of confidence also.
No, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, with your background, especially a growing kind of passion and involvement with athletics still and Pilates, Lee, how does this come to play in your field? Like once you graduated, where did your route lead you? I mean, prior to meeting as well, how does that look?
Well, nothing prior to meeting because we were babies when we met.
Totally.
But before this business.
Yeah, no, honestly, when I got out of university, I really just didn't know what I wanted to do. But I knew I was good with people. So I got into it, more of like the insurance, finance, private equity kind of world. And for me, it was just kind of learning from people. And I've always been able to really take little bits and pieces from everybody around me and kind of, collectively decide, how to use those. So for me, I just, really wanted to work hard and make a difference and be different and always kind of be that out of the box thinker. When I created a business that's quite successful, it actually still is around today. That does,
Thank God for that business.
Because you can't do a startup without.
What can you dive in? Like, what is it? If you can.
So I have a benefits consulting business specialized in private equity. We look at ways to consolidate portfolio companies of a private equity firm, thereby reducing the cost and increasing the value. And that's something in 2011 or 2010. I can't remember exactly when it started, but that I was the first to pioneer that specific strategy within private equity. For them, they love the multiples and they love the savings. And today, I mean, if we take over a private equity firm, we typically take all their portfolio companies with it. So, if you're one firm with 10 companies, we consolidate that. And that's one thing that nobody had looked at. When you have a big business out there, like I'll give you an easy example, like a Verizon, and Verizon buys a smaller company, they go under the umbrella. Private equity typically owns 50% of a business. Why can't they do the same thing? So that's kind of how I thought about it. I was actually on the subway on my way down to a meeting when I said, is this even possible? And years later, we really made it happen.
That's incredible. Diving into Frame, does that fall into your private equity experience as well? Like, does Frame fall under that umbrella you mentioned, or
how does that look? A lot of relationships, which really allowed me to have conversations with people to really get an understanding of what that startup world looked like. But ultimately, it was my partner in life and business, Melissa.
Oh, I was like, me?
That really, that gave me the confidence to get behind this idea. You need somebody who's,
Well, I'm a little, so Lee is innately more cautious, more trepidation.
Yeah.
Like calculated cautiousness.
Sure.
And I'm a little more of a risk taker.
Just a little. Yeah, but
so that complements one another, particularly when you're talking about doing a startup where you are pioneering a subsector of the market that's untapped and also going up against giants in the tech-enabled digital fitness world.
Yeah,
Totally.
I mean, for me, it was understanding a small business and understanding a big business, and then seeing the type of businesses that I really wanted to emulate. And so when we got into this venture together, I kind of knew, how to start the business. Now, when you
he helped with the structure.
Correct.
For sure.
But I do have to say I'm in perpetual startup mode because before Frame Reformer, I had started designing my first proprietary Pilates Reformer around 2018. And it was designed and developed for my studio, which I did an entire gut job and took over this whole corner of a really cool area in Toronto, Midtown Toronto. And it was closed down by the pandemic 2 months after it opened. So I've literally been in like perpetual startup mode. Lee did not help with my first business. He wanted nothing to do with it, although he was very supportive when, I was opening.
But I liked a business that could scale it. And when she brought me this idea, it just made sense.
Yeah.
So what was the difference between that and this? I know that was in-person classes. This kind of moves into mobile, remote. What kind of made you on board with that, Lee? And then Melissa, what was your idea behind it?
So brick and mortar is a little, you need a lot of, it's in person. You need to be there at all times. You need instructors. To scale that business takes a lot of time and money. For this business, you could scale it without even having a brick and mortar. So for me, everything that you could do is really from, you have to be boots on the ground, but ultimately you put your product at people's homes.
Yeah. There's more growth.
There's
more potential for growth.
Sure. That's right.
Obviously, people can grow brick and mortar studios, but it's a more insidious. It takes more time. You have to really do a lot with the one brick and mortar before you can even think about, capitalizing on that one very successful studio before you start.
And also, when I saw this business, it had never been done. Nothing's more exciting about kind of, looking nothing's as exciting as seeing an opportunity that hasn't been done, but the model has been proven out. So, when you look at other companies that have done similar things to us, but just not in the Pilates space, you see huge success and you see how that could translate into huge success in the reformer Pilates space.
Totally. Hence the untapped subsector of the market that we really were excited to capitalize, disrupt, and exploit.
Yeah, for sure. And doing some research prior, I know the market size is just ever growing and becoming substantial. What opportunity did you see with Frame, and what did the market look like at the time? And what kind of product was out there in conjunction to what you brought?
So product out there, not to negate the Pilates market. Pilates is phenomenal. It's primarily in studio. That's the way people consume their Pilates. It's very expensive, costly. Classes are waitlisted. They're very busy. There's many, many, many studios, and I'll let you elaborate on the difference between like the most successful spin studio and how prevalent Pilates is, and it's ever growing. So in the last 2 years, Pilates has become sort of a mainstream buzzword, where everybody from like Post Malone's rapping about it
to Barbie.
The Barbie cast was doing Pilates 2 or 3 times a week. It obviously has foundational roots. It's been around for 100 years. It's something that doctors prescribe. If you're rehabilitating an injury, it's something that all professional athletes are doing. It's low impact. It's amazing for mobility. If you're, if you're young and healthy, or if you're older and nurturing an injury, it's something that everybody and anybody can do, but oftentimes it's not overly accessible.
It's also
it's intimidating.
Well,
no.
But what I was going to say is that Pilates is there's fitness and then there's Pilates. Pilates has so many different modalities within it, so it really encapsulates all the different age groups out there. You can do it at 18, you can do it at 80, all depending on how you want to do it, how fast or how slow you want to do it.
Yeah, it's very similar to yoga in the sense that it's having a very similar evolution. Yoga started as something that was primarily very meditative, and it was breath work, and then it evolved, even if it's a sort of like a concurrent evolvement, but there was hot yoga, and then there's acrobatic yoga, and there's prenatal and postnatal, and there's jock yoga, and there's just so many amazing ways that you can practice yoga, and we're seeing the exact same thing with Pilates. So Pilates has been huge for so long. There's so many Pilates studios. I remember when I was raising my seed back in 21, I was telling, when I was doing my pitch, which I really love doing, I would mention or note that Pilates had the highest total participation rate in the US of all types of
sport,
exercise / sport. And some people, it was like an alarming, like really? And it's like, yes, everybody does Pilates. Ask anybody, they're doing Pilates. It's almost like this dirty little secret / not dirty, amazing for you. But now in the last 2 years, we're seeing this light being shown on Pilates. So Pilates is really having its moment. Having said that, it has there's that longevity to it. It's been around forever. It's not going anywhere. It's not fickle or fad. It's not to say that bar or some of those modalities aren't, but Pilates is something very similar to yoga. It's been around forever.
To give you an idea of the market, when we look at spin studios in the U.S., there are about 6,000 at its peak, 6,000 spin studios in the U.S. When we look at yoga and Pilates studios, there's 48,500. So when you look at the discrepancy and how big that market is, first of all, it's because it's never been an at-home activity. Yeah. It's been a brick and mortar activity.
So 9 out of 10, I was going to say 10 out of 10 times, people do not have Pilates reformers in their homes.
Because typically...
And if they do, the very, very, very small percentage of the 1% potentially may have a reformer. There is no instruction. So that means that they're bringing a private instructor into their home, which also eliminates the accessibility component.
For sure. What did the designing process look like? I know prior to Frame, you were kind of experimenting with that in your brick and mortar. What did that look like? The sourcing? Who did you work with to build this?
Yeah. Okay, so my first time designing a proprietary reformer, I actually sought out the original industrial designer for the Peloton. Because he was working with, he had started very, very specific to, not Pilates, to fitness equipment, and had also been working with a now quite famous Pilates reformer company called Solid Core. This is even predating Solid Core, but she was a Legree instructor. I was also a Legree instructor. And so I started working with Eric Valenci, the Valenci Design Group, and it was a very interesting experience. I really enjoyed it. It was several years iterating on a studio reformer, and I think that gave me, actually, I'm going to just eliminate the word think. I actually know it gave me the confidence, but also I had gone through the process of starting with a concept and then what's manufacturable from the concept, iterating in the design process, which is, yes, you have preliminary designs, you're approving them based on, 1, 2, 3, these are concepts, like, oh, and then you're iterating, and then you create a functional prototype, a rapid prototype. I was actually prototyping with like Oculus glasses to see from a spatial perspective. It was a very, very neat, interesting 2-year process. There is a lot of frustration when you are awaiting a rapid prototype or a functional prototype, and one little thing doesn't feel right. And when I say doesn't feel right, because I'm creating something that also has to have functionality, and I know reformers, and I know how it should feel and what I want it and intend to feel like. And so that whole process allowed me to move, not like in an expert way, but with a lot of confidence when I was creating the subsequent design. They were both called, one was called Frame by Melissa, and then our frame now is like the only frame, but Frame Reformer. It allowed us to move very expeditiously and with a lot of confidence, and really
we just wanted to modernize it, right? Where Pilates was steeped in tradition, really lacking in innovation. So the goal for us was to create a modernized version of the same of a reformer, to make it very
simple to use
and aesthetically pleasing, right? Very Eames chair-esque with the rounded curves. We wanted to put a design feature on it, something that could be in an Architectural Digest magazine, or
which my first reformer didn't have. But I was mostly talking about the process of like having a concept, and then from that concept moving it through all the stages of prototyping. Because I think a lot of people don't really understand that when you have something that's hardware and it's large and heavy, there's a lot of work involved, and it's a very long iterative process to actually make something tangible.
Definitely.
But so my studio reformer was not aesthetic. That was something that was very important, because now we are placing these not into commercial studios that are just designed for reformers, but also into people's homes. And now also, we've explored other avenues like in hotels, which also very important to be aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about the timing of this launch, I mean, you guys can tell me when the rollout happened, how it happened, but I mean, I feel like it's perfect timing, especially with COVID kind of hitting at that time. What did that rollout look like? Were you guys making to order? How did that look at launch?
Well, it's funny.
We were at the beginning of COVID.
Well, we had started Melissa had started talking about it or creating it, the design, I would say right as COVID was turning on, because she was opening up her studio. And at that point she was like, okay, all my private clients out there want me to come and train them. I have no time. And they're like, can you just send us videos? And so Melissa was like, okay, we have a business here. We should create a tech-enabled reformer. That way I don't have to go to the clients' houses, and they can just do it from home using me as well. So that's kind of how it all started.
That was the preliminary concept I had, which I didn't really have a lot of creative stamina to put forth any energy, because the studio was just taking it all up and I'm getting ready to launch. And then when COVID happened, it was like, okay, moment to like a little reprieve. And then I brought this concept to Lee, and he was kind of like, his interest was piqued. And then we had a lot of time. First of all, he was like out of the home at 7 a.m., working long hours with his other business. And then finally I had him and I highly concentrated time to explore this new concept that I had already started to feel there was a gap, again, based on just feeling it. So I had worked as an ambassador to Balance Body, and talking about like the less than 1%, I did place some Pilates reformers in some of my top clients' homes, and I would physically go to their homes and I was training them. And then when COVID, or not even before COVID, when I was working on my studio and flying back and forth to New York City, which is where I would meet with the designers and the engineers, I couldn't physically be, training them like I was prior. And it kind of spurred this like, I couldn't fully explore it, but it was there. And so when I told Lee, He was like, yeah, actually, I think that there's a big capacity for potential here. And
can I?
No, you can't, because I'm actually going to say I already had sketched a preliminary concept. And he goes, but where's the business plan? And I was like, whoa, I didn't get that far. I'm like, I didn't get that far. I have this idea. I think that a lot of people would be able to do Pilates if they have the accessibility, but also if the instruction's there, because I have clients who've been coming to me for a decade, some pro athletes, other just, highly athletically inclined people who are Pilates enthusiasts, and they would not go on the machine, the reformer themselves.
I think
at all.
So like,
Interesting.
One thing I always heard was you don't really invest in the idea, you invest in the founders. And from my perspective, like when I saw Melissa's passion for the initial project and how hard she worked for what she was trying to do from the studio perspective, and then she brings in this concept, immediately I knew we had something here, because she's so researched, she's diligent, she knew what she was doing, she was an expert in the field. And so wrapping that up in in a present like a bow, I knew we had something, and I knew I believed in her.
Minus the blueprint.
So yeah, I mean, look, like no founder really knows what the hell they're doing. Excuse my language, but nobody knows what they're doing until they get into it. And you constantly, you try, you make mistakes, you learn from the mistakes, but you're constantly in this iterative stage where you're trying to figure out how you can position this within the market. So I knew we had a phenomenal idea, but I knew we needed money behind us. So I said, we got to build the blueprint, and we got to build a deck, and we need to pitch investors, but not just any investors. We need the biggest in the area if you want to compete against the biggest. So, like I said, from a networking standpoint, I was able to get in the doors of places that I think a lot of people have a tough time getting in the doors of. And we put together a very strategic lineup of investors that were just at the right time when the market was really, really hot, and able to secure investment rather quickly. And we were off to the races. Yeah. Initially, I'll be honest.
Was this all prior to any sales too? Like, that's incredible.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. No, this is during like, we had like the preliminary concept. I had already started to design the functional prototype, but I mean, prototyping there was like 5 versions. So very preliminary. Yeah. We raised $5 million with the most like giants in the fitness world, and also like the brick and mortar fitness world.
It helped us get where we were faster, because we learned from some people that had done it before in a different capacity.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, in what ways did you leverage some of that network? I mean, just outside of just the capital, how was the capital spent? Did you leverage their relations for anything else? What did that look like?
Do you want me to take it?
Sure.
All right. Well, so, we added Mark Masterov, who happened to be our other board member. And Mark is, he was the founder of 24 Hour Fitness. They sold it for, in the billions. He's got experience in all different sectors of the fitness industry and still has his hands in basically everything. So we really leaned on him a lot.
Well, he was the founder, an operator, and he's also a sophisticated investor now years later. So he is amazing to learn from. But we also made sure that, I would say, like the 5 most important investors on our cap table are all close, not only to Lee and I.
No, first of all, they're all important, but ultimately there's 5.
I meant important in the fitness industry.
But I mean, in specific to
add value.
But specific to fitness is really important, right? It's a realm that I was unfamiliar with, that Melissa was very familiar with, and just leaning on them to really understand the market and where it's at, and their excitement behind this specific product in the area of the market, really gave us the confidence as well to go execute. So, you know,
It also gave us a lot of clout, and there was a lot of brand trust just based on the fact that we had the CEO of Crunch, the CEO of Hyperice, the founder of 24 Hour Fitness, and the largest manufacturer of fitness equipment in the world was one of our lead investors and also our manufacturing partner. So it just gave
that's huge.
a startup a little power.
But
For
but
sure.
allowed us to really expedite our way to market. And I think for us, everybody, I think that, you know, initially when we were pitching, we're like, how can you even compete against the biggest? You're not going to be able to do that. You know, you have people that say you can't. Personally, I think that nobody knows until they try. And as entrepreneurs, you try and you fail. Now, I'm not saying that this business is failing at all, but I'm saying that if you don't try, you won't know if you can do it. And when you want to make a change or build something, I mean, do it. Go for it. Take a shot. And that's kind of what we did. And when you have some really, like I said, big people in the industry saying there's a need for this in the market, and they really see everything, you knew you had something and you had to work quickly to, you know, to get it to market.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, outside of the physical product, you mentioned kind of getting away from your studio, but then recording. What did the development of that look like? I mean, for the screen and for the consumer who's listening here, what does that look like, that recording process for those classes that they would see on screen at home?
There's a lot more that goes into it than just the recording of the things. You got to build the whole UI, user interface behind it, and then content.
For sure.
Yeah. So the software development is just as critical and complex. I mean, like the complexity associated with developing hardware and software.
Yep.
Most people have a business in one or the other. So amalgamating those two, obviously just, you know, the complexity is there. But the one thing that I was quite confident in was the ability to, again, assuming that we've already developed all the software, which we did, and we placed a lot of emphasis on developing the brand, and we worked with leading digital companies in Chicago, and we were consulting in various places. I knew that we had to do our film recording at a studio in New York City with top instructors around the world. I guess primarily just the US, actually, or North America.
Yeah.
And I mean, content creation is one of my favorite aspects of this entire business.
It was probably the most fun we had.
It's the most fun, but there's also a creative component that goes into
being on film.
Yeah, filming. And I'm also on the platform as well, so it's really fun.
Love it. So, I mean, even without just the launch of the classes that you had up front, but what does that continuation look like? Because I know you definitely have to add classes. The instructors have to be on their feet ready to go with more classes. What does that look like, adding more?
Yeah, so what was really important to us was get that first iteration product out and delivered to customers' homes. From there, it was getting feedback. What did you like? What didn't you like? And really understanding that customer journey and really seeing, you know, what was missing, if there are filters that they wanted to add to our tablet, you know, just making it very user-friendly and customer-friendly, and, you know, figuring out what classes people liked and what classes they didn't like, and then doing more of the ones that they did like. And to be honest,
I haven't heard of any classes.
It's true. I was about to say, there aren't any that they haven't liked, but there's some that they want more of.
For sure.
Totally.
And so it's building that content library.
Actually, people are loving, or the feedback is, there's a lot of interest around like snack workouts. 20, 30 minutes are very, very popular, especially when we look at our own data and what's being consumed the most. It is, I would say, a combination. So we have, within the umbrella of our frame, user experience, user interface, we have an offer: classical, contemporary, a fusion, playing around with other Pilates accessories, and then power, which is like an athletic version of Pilates, a little more cardiovascular. And I would say it's quite split. But that 20, 30 minutes are hugely popular right now. And I'm assuming it's easier to...
What I found the most interesting is that most of the people that were buying our reformers were women. But when they brought it home, I actually was just speaking. Can I drop his name because he's been using us on podcasts? Jim Huther, and he just told me he's doing.
He's the CEO of Hyprise.
He's the CEO of Hyprise, and he said he's doing frame 6 times a week.
Wow.
So, I can't tell you how many emails or.
I just received an email from somebody who bought a frame about a month ago, and she said, my boyfriend is a former college football player. I can't get him off my reformer. And then a male, I can't remember his name, he just tagged Frame a couple days ago, and he's like, I started doing Pilates on my wife's machine, and like the resistance is insane. And we're constantly hearing about Frame customers, husbands or boyfriends who are like taking over the reformer.
And I think to us, it's really exciting because for myself, Melissa was, a Pilates instructor for a long time prior to us getting into this startup. And I was really reluctant to go because it's intimidating. First of all, I haven't done reformer Pilates. Second, it's predominantly women. And third, I didn't just think I could keep up. So my first time that I went was probably 2 years into her instructing. And when I went back 4 times that week because for me, it was the best workout I had ever received in my life.
Love it.
And she yelled at me the entire time on the microphone.
I do find that men, when they try reformer Pilates, there's almost like they become addicted to the workout because it's almost like they accepted the challenge without knowing it was going to be such a challenge. And then when they were challenged, they wanted to continuously be challenged. And also there's like, you never feel your core. You don't plateau in Pilates. It just gets harder because you're able to stay for long. You're able to stay in the... many different exercises and ways to utilize the resistance or even just your body weight and the instability that's created from having a stationary platform and then the carriage that rolls is a challenge like no other.
For sure. I mean, kind of wrapping up here slowly, but what does that consumer experience look like? So a listener was to go on Frame Fitness and order Reformer. I mean, you guys have a beautiful aesthetic product, also very complex and user-friendly interface. What does that look like? If they were to purchase one, gets to their home, white glove delivery, I did see that. What does that look like?
So basically, the user the customer would come onto our website or Goop, and they would go through our our website and be able to order, and they would receive their product within 2 weeks. Having said that, we offer white glove, and we also offer a room of choice.
So white glove, they're fully assembling and then removing all the packaging. And then they're actually creating their entire account and everything is done on the screen. Touch screen, 24-inch touch screen, so very large. And how to use the reformer, how to use the video, it's all on the screen. So you basically the reformer setup. I think most people do choose white glove because it's being assembled. It's really actually simple. So one of the biggest things that we really wanted to focus on was simplicity in setting it up. So there wouldn't be it wouldn't be difficult. It wouldn't come in 25 different pieces. We have one box. We have one box for the reformer that comes with the tablet and the reformer all put together. There's 4 steps to setting it up, and one is just clipping on the foot straps. Is that? No, but the goal for us was to make it simple. Having said that, people who are investing in a Pilates reformer do want it set up, and they do have it set up, and then the process is really simple because it's all just done on the screen, very intuitively. Yeah, the user journey, that's really what we're focusing on. Is once it gets, and they get a reach out from Frame, And then
we just stay in touch. I mean, Melissa and I,
I'm
Melissa,
pretty hands-on with customers.
totally. I mean, without Melissa being hands-on with customers, I just you feel the passion, and when they have a conversation, everybody thinks they're Melissa's best friend, and personally, I think she thinks she feels the same about the customers. But when you're in a startup, you really want to understand every little thing, any issue, any feedback, right, is relevant to us, so that we can just make the experience that much better from a customer service standpoint.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, I like to conclude each episode with this, and I'd like to hear from each. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
Lee, go first.
It's a good question.
Advice. One piece of advice. Make it concise.
You learn from all the mistakes. So get up and keep going, because you don't learn when things are going well. You learn when things are going, when there's issues that arise. So I think challenges. So I think that
language is very powerful.
I think that nothing is easy, and there's a reason why a lot of people don't start a business, is because they think it's really challenging.
So getting comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Getting comfortable in the uncomfortable, and that's something that I really had to learn personally along the way. So I think that drastically changes your outlook when you start to let things roll a little bit, and separate yourself in terms of emotion, and be able to really handle the issues and then respond.
Isn't it funny that I said concise?
I'm not concise.
No, you'd be surprised. Everyone gets really elaborate. I love it though. It's perfect.
Okay. Piece of advice. I would say instincts. Don't ignore your gut instinct. Obviously, some people are more intuitive and in tune with their own instincts, but I think to develop gut instinct is one of the most critical things an entrepreneur can utilize, that lies within everyone, whether they've developed it or not, because entrepreneurship can be very lonely. Obviously, with Lee and I, we're together, so we're constantly bouncing things off one another, and if something challenging arises, we discuss it, and I'm usually here helping Lee through it because he's more sensitive than I am. But I think just focusing on that gut feeling and gut instincts, particularly pertaining to who you're going to be doing a partnership with, if you're taking investment or you're raising capital, if you're talking to investors, like, it's just so important to
align yourself,
to make sure you're aligned. Yeah. And to, again, just trust the gut instincts.
Yeah. Love it. Well, you guys, thank you so much for taking the time today. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Frame Fitness at framefitness.com.